Everybody, and welcome to our weekly live event. I'm Steve Farrell with Humanities Team coming to you live from our studio here in Boulder, Colorado. And as you can see, I'm with very esteemed guests here. I'm going to formally introduce them in just a moment, but I'll just say now, welcome David, Ronaldo, and Sarah. Great to have you all with us.
Thank you.
All right.
Good to be with you.
Fantastic. Well, you're gonna hear lots more from my esteemed guests. So big shout out to everybody that is the Humanities Team folks that are out there on our Facebook pages, Humanities Stream members, people that are Facebook members with David, with Ronaldo, with Sarah, also Evolutionary Leaders. This is an Evolutionary Leader group, by the way, so shout out to the Evolutionary Leaders. Also, shout out to John Raymer and the Sign Network. They're broadcasting to a whole bunch of Facebook pages. So, hey, everybody. Great to have you with us. You're going to really enjoy this program. As I mentioned, I'm going to formally introduce our guests here in just a moment. They're esteemed guests doing big things in the world. We're grateful to have them with us here for the hour. So now, as always, you can share your comments out on social media. Right here in the studio, I can see comments and questions that come in, so I can throw them at our panel here during the hour. I want to invite you to share anything, and the earlier in the hour, the better. There's more likelihood I can bring those questions to our panel. So our theme today is it's our moment of choice. So and the big pivot that we're making toward what we call in Humanities Team conscious living, which creates this sustainable, flourishing planet. Now, our moment of choice is actually the title of an award-winning book. It's been in hardback for a while. It's won multiple awards. And guess what? Hey, this week it came out in paperback. So this is why we're doing this broadcast now. We want to invite you. We're going to tell you a little bit about the book. It's very inspiring. It has over 40 authors, and it talks about all of the ways that we can live consciously. It's an incredibly inspiring book, which is why it's won so many awards. And it's now more affordable, available on Amazon and your favorite bookstores. Our Moment of Choice by Evolutionary Leaders. So want to invite you to check it out. Okay, let me give our esteemed panel a proper introduction. I'll start with David Gershon. David is the co-founder and CEO of Empowerment Institute. It's one of the world's foremost authorities on behavior change and large systems transformation, and applies this expertise to issues requiring community, organizational, and social change. And David, welcome to you again here.
Thank you, Steve.
All right, and then Ronaldo Brudico. Ronaldo is an accomplished futurist, author, speaker, and founding president of the World Business Academy, a collaborative network of mindful individuals collectively exploring the leading edge of business, and a preeminent publisher of new paradigm business literature. He is the co-author of a book published last year called Freedom from Mideast Oil, and several other books in prior periods. And big welcome to you, Ronaldo.
Thank you. I really appreciate being here. And I realize now I've got the wrong Zoom background here. I'm going to have to change that right now so I can be appropriate to the occasion.
All right. Well,
there we go. Coming to you from Santa Barbara. Thanks for having me, Steve. Good to be here.
Yeah, great to be with you. Boy, lucky you, coming live from Santa Barbara. Okay, and then Sarah McCrum, who, by the way, boy, she's coming to us in the middle of the night from Australia. So this is a live program. Wow. So let me introduce Sarah. She's a coach author whose work explores how we can be fully human and fully alive in an age of exponential expansion and technology. Through the interviews she has conducted, Sarah has demonstrated how to respect children and represent their voices authentically in the media as the UN Convention on Rights of the Child. And big welcome to you, Sarah.
Thank you very much, Steve.
All right, and great to have you all with us. Hey, let's talk a little bit about this Moment of Choice book. And by the way, I wrote a chapter in there too. I wrote chapter 11 on conscious business. So, and this book actually called Our Moment of Choice. It was created by the Evolutionary Leaders. The four of us are members of the Evolutionary Leaders. There actually are now well over 100, I think maybe over 200 esteemed leaders that are part of the Evolutionary Leaders. So it's a fantastic organization that's working on social change. This whole focus on creating a sustainable, flourishing planet. So great to be with you all. I don't very often get to do a program with my colleagues in this organization, so this is fun. Well, David, maybe I can start with you. Can you share a little bit about your chapter in this book, Our Moment of Choice?
Sure. Well, it was a big idea. It still is a big idea. It's a lot of my life's work, which we call Reinventing the Planet, which is looking at 5 areas that we need to transform in profound ways if we are going to evolve, and we are in the process of evolving. And one is around climate. One is around the issue of peace, war and peace. One is around, ecosystem collapse and climate and how we restore it. The third one is around the issue of women's empowerment and transforming poverty in the developing part of our world. The fourth area is around how we transform our relationship to knowledge. How do we change the way we think about change so we can be more impactful in the change efforts we're doing? And the fifth area is around transforming how we invest money to do good, if you will, we call doing good better, by virtue of this whole notion of second order change. Second order change fundamentally is around transformative social change. So this chapter really unpacks the notion of transformative social change and applies it to what we call a grand strategy for reinventing the planet, or simply speaking, how to make the planet work better than we currently have it. Do you want me to say more?
Part A
I can
and
continue
part B.
on. There's a lot more I can.
So
Steve,
yeah,
I'm ready for you.
I'm going to come back to you with a follow-on question. Then when I come to
Yeah,
Ronaldo and Sarah,
sure.
I'll do the same thing. We're going to go first about
Okay.
the chapter and then about their work in the world. Because again, you all are doing huge things out in the world. I don't want to leave that out as we go around the call here. So now, of course, like in the 1987 or something, when this torch was passed that went around the earth, and this was one of the huge things you were a part of. And then there are all of these, you've got Cool City initiatives, all of these things that are happening that are just major social change. Do you want to talk about that for a minute here too?
Sure, I can. Let me actually speak a little bit to the notion of what we call second order change, because it'll make a lot more sense to understand what I'm doing in that bigger context. So our world is a function of many social systems. We organize civilization around health, our healthcare systems, around economic systems, around political systems, around education systems. These systems are currently stressed and starting to oscillate and break down. And when they break down, they become marginally functional, or they are completely broken. And when that happens, they start to oscillate or perturbate, or they begin to essentially become unmoored from that which keeps them in place. And the good news is that that allows them also to transform as well as break down. So second order change is about the process of evolving social systems to higher levels of complexity and social good and social value. And this is in contrast to first order change, which is primarily trying to create change through legislation, command and control, financial incentives, paying people to change, awareness campaigns, hoping if you tell something to someone, they'll change, and protest, which is cajoling people to change. And they are not working, particularly around the issue of climate and all the issues fundamentally. So they require this second order change approach. And 2 of the initiatives I'm working on that are of substance in the current reality is how do we change our relationship to how we experience the climate issue, or if you will, what do we do about climate change? And so we built a project called the Cool City Challenge, which is empowering cities to become carbon neutral by 2030 without offsets. We've empowered 3 cities with $1 million grants in our support, and they are off on a grand adventure to create the boldest and most dynamic interventions around carbon reduction on the planet. And I might add, cities are 70% of the climate emissions that we have. So cities are the lever. So that's an example. And of course, there's many more things that I could say. Each project has a very robust social innovation associated with it. And each of them has been in play for quite a while, 10 years on to 30 or 40 years. So they're all ready to scale right now.
Yeah, boy, great work, David. And what website? I know you've got many, but what would be one website people
Probably
can
the
go
one
to
that they can get the best feel for things would be reinventing.earth. which lays out all the initiatives and the second order change framework that we build all these things upon.
Right. Reinventing.earth. Okay, fantastic. Thank you, David. Ronaldo, let me come over to you here. So, and of course, you're doing incredible things. I covered these things, or some of them, in your introduction. But can we start out by just talking about your chapter in this book called Our Moment of Choice?
Yeah, I think, it's interesting. And thanks again for having me, Steve. One of the things that's obvious is not that we are dealing with change. So the moment of choice is kind of interesting. And you use this term pivot point. And when we all got together to write that book, I thought we had a pretty good idea what the pivot point might look like. And clearly that's no longer true. So what the Ukrainian war has done is introduced an extraordinarily new variable into the whole equation. So from my perspective, I continue to believe, as I have since 1986 when I started the Academy, that the business community must become much more proactive because the political forces in our societies are simply not capable of achieving the kind of change that we have to achieve at the speed it has to occur. So, the old philosopher, the Greek philosopher Heraclitus famously observed, you never step twice in the same stream. Once you put your foot in, it's change. That's always been with us, change. What hasn't been with us is change at this speed. And the speed is destabilizing virtually every Western democracy. It's clearly destabilizing Europe with the worst outbreak since World War II. You have over 5 million refugees. And I think there's an enormous number of factors that are building up, which my Hindu friends would call Kali Yuga. And what our job is, I think, is to come out the other side of that. And so I think anybody who's conscious about business or otherwise has to start looking at the fact that our assignment now is to lubricate the transition to minimize the human toil. And frankly, that only can happen if the biosphere begins to be healed. And we can talk more about that if you like, because that's been one of my major works for the last 25 years. But I'll just leave it there and let people ask questions about what, if anything, I see as the future of business having a key role in this, why I think politics is hopelessly not up to the task currently, and what the threats from politics are to a stable transition, and why I believe that we will come through. It becomes increasingly cloudy as to how and where, but I believe that consciousness has shifted. And I think ultimately that will be the determining factor. It's just there's a lot of pain that's going to happen between here and there, apparently.
Yeah, boy, I'm sure viewers are saying amen to that. There's a fair amount of pain out in the world right now. So let's go a little deeper here into the biosphere aspect, but as well, and as people can see on your screen, you're the founder of the World Business Academy. So, and business is this hugely powerful institution, and you're out there with all kinds of innovations that you're bringing to business all over the world. So you want to just take a minute to talk about these things, Ronaldo?
Yeah, I think on the nonprofit side, of course, we've been publishing as a think tank continuously since 1986, dozens and dozens of books, hundreds of articles. I've written 4 books and probably 3 dozen articles myself. And at the same time, I'm a business person full time. I'm a merchant banker. And the goal of all of my business activities since I entered business back in the early 70s was to find something that made a difference and figure out how to bring it about using business as a tool. So using business as a lever for transformation. And that was a pretty lonely job up until the last few years. We talked a lot in the early days about why, say 1970, why Milton Friedman was wrong, that trickle-down economics did not make sense. It actually isn't in good business. And why the idea of what's called shareholder primacy, the idea that you would only do things that would make your shareholders richer, was the sole legitimate purpose of business. That's Friedman. And that, of course, was flawed. We knew it then, and we've written about it a lot since. And what really has happened is a number of us started to collect, and Deepak and I formed an organization about 10 years ago called Just Capital, which is its own nonprofit. Now I spun it out of the Academy. And Just Capital has been reforming the business community by pointing out who it is that is most acting in just ways. And we rate them, the 1,000 largest public companies each year. We rate them. We used to do it for Forbes up until last December. Now we do it for CNBC. We have our own shows there. And what we do is we rate them based on, quote, justness. And how we get that decision of what's just is we've now interviewed about 150,000 Americans all over the country, every single demographic and region of the country. And we ask them year after year, 25,000 more each year, how do you go about determining what would just corporate behavior be. And what they've come to say over and over again is we want companies to be more proactive. We want them to start closing the pay wage gap. The inequality is destroying our society. They've come more and more to say that we trust that we must heal the biosphere. It's not an optional thing you do if you got extra money left at the end of the month. It's a primer driver. And when Just Capital does that and receives the kind of huge support it has now gotten from Wall Street, it changes the dynamic because it changes the goalpost. And if we can change those goalposts fast enough, and I think we are changing them a lot faster than they were, we've got a very good chance that business can start to erupt into a more cause-worthy organization. I'll give you one example and quit. When the governor of Florida, DeSantis, recently decided to punish Disney for objecting to the governor's then bill he was passed, basically it was an anti-LGBTQ bill. And it said you can't use the word gay, and it was a very, very unbelievably retrograde bill. Disney spoke out, and whereupon DeSantis retaliated by basically collapsing the entire arrangement that Disney entered into when it built Orlando, and has stripped them of their independent status at the cost, I might add, of tens of millions to the Orlando citizens who are now going to have to pick up the cost of what Disney was carrying. And so Disney was asked, are you going to drop back and go, uh-oh, stay quiet, we went too far, we just better pretend like something shouldn't bother us even when it's attacking our fellow citizens who have a different sexual preference? And to their credit, Disney said, no, we're going to push back. The chairman of our board, Paul Tudor Jones, went on CNBC the next day, was interviewed, and they said, does this mean that business is going to get timid because, if it sticks its head up, it's going to get shot at by the politicians? And Paul, to his credit, said, absolutely not. What it is it's a cry for more action faster. And I do believe that's where the most intelligent and frankly, the most successful people in business are doing, because we've replaced the idea of shareholder primacy with what we've been preaching at the Academy for a couple of decades, which is called stakeholder capitalism. That the companies who make the most money actually are the ones who understand they have an obligation to their employees, to their vendors, to their customers, and of course, ultimately, we do have to take care of the shareholders, but we also have to take care of the biosphere. So if you don't do all of those things in balance, you will end up unsuccessful. And that's what our work has been demonstrating as we publish it year after year.
Yeah, boy, great work there, Ronaldo, and have Deepak in there and Paul Tudor Jones. Wow, talking about
it's quite a club. Go online. It is a nonprofit, but Paul liked the idea of .com because he hadn't done many nonprofits. So it says justcapital.com, but it's a nonprofit. And go look at it. And I want you to look at the board we've attracted. We have 38 people who are extraordinarily successful, who are all using their reputations to urge the public to demand more of business so that we can push back on where we hope society will go, because a healthy society makes for a healthy commerce.
Yeah, no kidding. I'm going to, when I get to my chapter, talk a little bit about conscious business too. So thank you, Ronaldo. Wow, good work. And and last, definitely not least, I'm coming over to Sarah. And again, Sarah's coming in the middle of the night from Australia. So wow, really appreciate you being here with us, Sarah. Let's talk about your chapter in the book, and then we're going to go to the important work you're doing out in the world.
Thank you, Steve. My chapter is about money, and it's really an invitation for us to look at our relationship with money. Because if we look at the role that money plays in the world, we tend to blame it for a lot of the ills that are happening. It appears to be at the center of almost everything that's wrong with the world. And I had a very extraordinary experience about 11 years ago where I found myself writing messages from money. I just had a business failure. It was a very difficult time. I didn't have any money at the time. And I in these messages, it was like the energy of money was speaking to me through my pen. I wrote a whole book in the end, and it showed itself as an energy that is based in love, that is about abundance and generosity, and that is deeply aligned with nature. And so in a way, what I received was a way of relating with money that actually works for all of us, that enables society to do the things that we know in our hearts are the right way to live. We have that, we have the kind of coding within us, and it seems like our relationship with money has taken us in a completely different direction. And so in the book, I wrote about that, about how money can be something that brings us together, that really does enable us to contribute to society when we have a relationship with it that doesn't cause deep conflict. Because I think the issue that so many people have is that they're very conflicted around money, especially when they feel a strong sense of purpose or they want to contribute good in the world. And they've learned, whether it's from religion or from other sources, that doing good or being a good person and having money don't go together. And then you get people, many people I've met who've made a lot of money and have a very deep shame or guilt underneath, or other people who would love to do something really creative or that's really going to make a difference in the world, and they hold themselves back so much because they feel so conflicted around actually being successful and really being able to access the resources that they need to be able to do that. And it seems to me that if we don't resolve our relationship with money so that it becomes a creative and healthy relationship and that it is genuinely based in love, then I don't think that all these problems that we need to solve will be solved, because if that relationship sits at the heart of it, that full of conflict and fear and stress, then we will continue to create what we've been creating so far. So for me, this relationship that we have with money, whether we're in business or whether it's in a more personal capacity, is a place where every single one of us can directly make a difference. We can be more conscious in the way we operate with money. And that flows all the way through from the most domestic situation to the largest business or anything that involves the organization of money.
Yes, money is important when we talk about, again, we use this term conscious living in Humanities Team, and there's so many dimensions to conscious living. So we're getting into some right here now, money being one of them, our relationship with money. So now, Sarah, as I mentioned in your introduction, your work out in the world is diverse and substantial. Do you want to just talk a little bit about these important initiatives that you're working on?
Yes, I'll speak about the main thing that I'm working on now, which is fairly newly launched just over a month ago. It's a business that's called Love2. We started to conceive it about 5 years ago, me and a business partner. And it's based on the very simple fact that there is a huge amount of money in the world that has been mandated or committed to be invested in environmental and social improvement. And the vast majority of it is not reaching the businesses that actually make the most difference in those fields. It doesn't reach the grassroots farmers, for example, who regenerate the land, because they simply don't have the capability to meet the requirements of the financial institutions and the capital markets. That's where the money is. And so there's this great big gap between the people who do some of the most genuine and heartfelt work and the people who have the big dollars to put into it. And so what we wanted to do was to bridge that gap and create a system that would allow really significant investment into the grassroots good work that's being done around the world. And so what we did is we've created a new kind of financial product that's actually directly backed by the regeneration of ecosystems and human health and well-being. And so what we do, what we've started off by doing is working with a group of farmers who are some of the best regenerative farmers in Australia, and this will spread to the rest of the world as we grow. And we have looked at the improvement that they've made to the ecology over up to 30 years. So this is some very remarkable work that they've been doing. We decided not to follow what most systems do when they're looking at natural capital accounting, where they try to put a value on a tree, for example, or a whale or a koala bear, because that doesn't really make sense. Trees exist in an ecosystem and you can't separate a tree from everything else. So we decided to look at the improvement in ecosystems and then put a value on the work that people do, the investment that people make into improving their ecosystem. And we've done that with our initial group. And what that's enabled us to do is to create an asset that's worth almost $1 billion Australian dollars, which we are now able to take to the financial markets, which are the biggest markets in the world, because it's structured in a way that they can understand. So we knew that things like governance, things like auditability, scalability, these are the things that the financial markets need, but that's not what, for example, farmers tend to be able to meet, because they don't operate that way. They operate on their own, on their farm with their family. It's a very different world. And so what we see is the possibility, or really what we've done is reimagined the way that we value what's happening in the world, so that we can focus on valuing what's genuinely valuable for life. If you think about it, at the moment, we value a dead tree more than a live tree. We value things, like our valuation system isn't aligned with the deeper values that we hold as human beings. So what we really needed to do was reimagine the way that we value things, and then create a system that would enable that value to actually be met with money, so that we can invest in the people who know best how to do this, and they're the best people to share their knowledge and their experience, so that we can grow the regeneration of nature, and then we'll also include the regeneration of human health and well-being, because that's equally important. We can grow that as fast as possible if we do it if we start with the knowledge that we already have, that we know is working, because there are so many good examples at the moment of people who are regenerating their ecosystems and improving food production, which is really important, because we must protect our food production at the same time. And then, of course, they're improving the quality of water, quality of air, quality of soil, quality of biodiversity, all those really important things. So that's fundamentally what Love2 is about. It's enabling people to do what they love to do, and enabling us to invest in those people who love to do things that are beneficial for all of us.
Yeah, wow. Great work, Sarah. Really fantastic. And your work is so diverse. You really cover a lot of ground here, from the initiative you're talking about here, to children's initiatives, to money initiatives, etc. So now we're talking about this book, Our Moment of Choice. It's an award-winning book. It's been in hardback. The Evolutionary Leaders Organization created it. There are over 40 authors. We're 4 among the authors that authored this book. And it's available beginning this week in paperback, so it's more economical. And it's bringing in the things that we're talking about here and so much more. Again, we're 4 of over 40 authors that wrote this book. So I want to invite you to check it out. All of the funding, too, from these book sales is going to Evolutionary Leaders. It's an incredible organization. If you go to evolutionaryleader.net, leaders.net, you'll see the organization and the incredible work they're doing, the esteemed people that are part of it all over the world. Truly an amazing organization. Now, my chapter is chapter 11, and my chapter talks about conscious business. Conscious living is kind of a big wave, to use a metaphor, that's coming in. There's more and more discussion about conscious living. And the way we like to think of it in Humanities Team is that we could actually go, let me talk about it from a science basis. Albert Einstein, in his time, when he created his field of relativity and was looking into this unified field theory, which he never quite got done in his lifetime, all of his work was built around this basis that there is an underlying unity in all of life. He tried to get there with a unified field theory that just tied it all together, and he didn't quite get there. As you know, he's one of the most esteemed scientists to come along here on this planet, but he wasn't able to mathematically prove this. Now, there are scientists today, including Nassim Haramein, who have been working on this, and we've actually worked closely with Nassim Haramein on science-based masterclasses, and know that later this year, he's going to be bringing forth a unified field theory that really brings closure to this whole thing that Einstein was working on. It says there is an underlying unity, that everything from the smallest quantum scale to the largest cosmological objects, is connected. It's actually a part of one thing, one body. It's conscious, it's alive. This is an extraordinary research that Nassim's going to be bringing forward. There are other esteemed scientists that are also talking about our deep connection, our oneness. Greg Braden, Bruce Lipton, Lynn McTaggart, and many others whose names aren't well known, that have made it their life work to study this. It all actually makes so much sense that astronomers, right, have been talking about this in a little different context, where they say there was a Big Bang, right, and this is a living and breathing universe. There was mass that was almost smaller than a pinhead that exploded, and that is these galaxies that are this universe that is our world, and it's kind of a living, breathing universe that is exploding out, and then they're saying it's going to draw back in, and then it'll breathe out, right? So conscious living brings in this connection, this oneness. Now it also brings in this notion of exterior world and interior world, right? And Ken Wilber, who's an esteemed philosopher, says that we currently live in a flatland because all of our focus is on the exterior world. And the interior world has been given hardly any attention. And the interior world is, of course, where prayer and meditation and walking in nature, and actually even just being state, like even right now, the being state that you're in, just where we're just here talking and breathing in this place of connection, where we're not just in this mental, emotional place of where in business, which I'm going to get to, it can just be about top line and bottom line growth, where we're just saying, damn the torpedoes, we're going to do what we need to do, we're going to get that revenue target, and it's all stockholder based, not what Ronaldo was talking about earlier, a stakeholder base, where it's about many different stakeholders that are part of this planet, communities, people, the earth itself. It's all alive, right? So the chapter then that I wrote on conscious business, chapter 11, talks about this science, this basis that we're connected, that we're actually emanations or offspring of the one. And that when we live consciously and we bring this style of living to business, and the business has a stakeholder orientation that includes the interior, not just exterior, it's just a whole different way of living on the earth. And it's a whole different business. It's a business that's about supporting life, nourishing life, and yes, developing profits, right? Because without revenues and profits, the business will go out of business. So stakeholder growth includes profits as a key element. So now, there are other things that I get to in the chapter. In 2015, Humanities team did reach out to Ervin Laszlo, the Club of Budapest, to the Sanji family in Japan, the Goy Peace Foundation, and then Chris Laszlo at Case Western Reserve University, to create, between the four of us, a conscious business declaration that brings in these things that I'm talking about: interior and exterior, oneness, stakeholder orientation, a focus on an earth that's alive and conscious. And if you go to consciousbusinessdeclaration.org, you'll actually see the declaration. There are 4 organizations created. And if you're a business person, invite you to just print it out, share it in the organization that you're a part of. So we're very passionate about conscious business and Humanities team. I'm a co-founder with Neil Donald Walsh of Humanities team. We founded it in 2003. Part of the reason we're so passionate about it is business in today's world is the most powerful institution in the world. Hundreds of years ago, it was the church, right? This is kind of passed to different entities or organizations over time. Right now, it's business. Business is, in a sense, if I want to use train metaphor, business is the lead car on the train. It's pulling the train here in our global society. So if business isn't conscious, if it just stays stockholder based, if there's no interior focus, if it's only top and bottom line growth, then when we talk about our moment of choice and we talk about pivoting, and we talk about living consciously, and we talk about creating a sustainable and flourishing planet, it's like, how would we ever get there, right? How would we ever get there if the whole focus is just top and bottom line growth? So these are the things that I talk about in my chapter 11 of Our Moment of Choice. It's available in soft copy, paperback beginning this week, and invite you to check out the book. There are many inspiring, over 40 chapters in this book. Now, I'll just tell you a little bit about my work here too. Humanities team. Yeah, please do. Yeah, thank you.
So there's a book that everybody should read on the topic you just raised. It's called Global Mind Change by Willis Harman. Because on the occasion of his 70th birthday, one of the brightest human beings in the world, the guy who first taught artificial intelligence anywhere in the world and taught it at Stanford University, and my partner till the day he died, Willis observed precisely what you just said, that business was the most powerful institution on the planet, and therefore there was a unique responsibility when you are that institution to take responsibility for the whole. And I urge your readers, it's been out a number of years now, but it absolutely makes the case, not in a chapter, but in one of the most brilliant books ever written. And I urge people to read it because that is the nub of why the World Business Academy exists. That is the nub of why we must change the business community's approach to how it sees its role in society. And it's why those of us who are consumers must support those businesses that most reflect our deeper values, because that then reinforces their conduct. And I urge everyone to see themselves as part of a movement, not as a disembodied consumer of products, but part of a movement that needs to help catalyze a different way of thinking about our responsibility as stewards of the planet, rather than as rapacious, greedy, self-indulgent, what I would call a runaway species, which was given this incredible blue planet to live on, and that we've systematically destroyed. And we need to really look at the depth of our consciousness, which is what Willis's book is about, what your chapter is about. If we're going to shift that, because it's collective consciousness only at this point that will shift it. And I believe the business community has to be the tool, but our collective consciousness has to be the objective for all of us.
Yeah, no kidding. Our collective consciousness. Yeah, it starts with us individually, and then it just is an overflowing where we're coming together collectively with a true movement. That's how only way we get there. So let me just share briefly now. We Humanities Team, again, we're a 501c3 nonprofit. What we're focused on is the headline on it is Changing Humanity's Future, which is a pretty big headline. Candidly, I think all of us here are focused on that as we went around the table. This is just kind of the theme that we're putting on this work we're doing. And then we say, okay, great, change humanity's future. How are we going to do that? And we say, by living consciously. It's right under our nose. It's the first domino. We just do these things that we're talking about. We live this way. And when we look out on the world, we can't any longer treat the earth like a refrigerator, where it's just resources to be grabbed and harvested. There's no way to live consciously in the way that we're describing it here and to just rape and pillage the earth because it's just a whole different worldview where it's alive, it's conscious, it's our home. So now, and then the other piece to this as a 501c3 nonprofit is, Buckminster Fuller talked about the trim tab, right? So a 1,000-foot ship has got a little 1 or 2 foot trim tab, right, that turns the whole ship. So, and he was always encouraging organizations and people to find your trim tab. What is the thing you can do that can create massive change? So our organization said, well, we can create a revolutionary conscious streaming platform that, and then partner with thought leaders all over the world with their online education and stream it into homes, translate it to major languages and stream it into homes at an economical price with our partners, again, all over the world. Sarah has programs on our platform. The Evolutionary Leaders has programs on our platform. This program that we're doing right now is going to it's called Humanity Stream Plus. It's when we first brought it out as a subscription platform, it was $5.99 a year, and we dropped it to $4.99 a year. Then we dropped it to $3.99 a year. Then we announced a 1-for-1 program, which you're probably familiar with, like with Tom's Shoes. So in this 1-for-1 program, when everybody that buys a subscription gifts a subscription to an underprivileged, underserved individual. So because a lot of the planet, there's no way people could, even if we drop this down to $90 a year, that they couldn't afford it, right? There's a lot of people on this planet that don't have budget for that. So our one-for-one program is giving a subscription to everybody, to people that are in this underserved, underprivileged category on a one-for-one basis to people that are paid subscribers. So I'm going to just show you, we've got a little clip here. Kurt Johnson is actually one of the authors of this book, Our Moment of Choice. We actually have many chapters from evolutionary leaders here on the platform. We're going to play a little 2-minute clip from, this panel is on pro-social, which also comes out of evolutionary leaders. There's some esteemed ELs, one in particular that created the pro-social movement. This was a panel that was part of the Global Oneness Summit. We do the summit every October. So let's cut away and just look at this, this little 2-minute segment real quick, and then we're going to come back and the four of us are going to talk some more. Here we go.
What are your hopes? What are your aspirations for pro-social spirituality? And we'll begin with you, Kurt.
Well, I see a possibility in pro-social spirituality that I've never seen anywhere else before, because it's the beginning of bringing together the entire landscape that's going to have to come together in all of our skill sets, from all the external knowledge of science and the internal knowledge from the spiritual traditions, into how we actually move and become a cosmopolitan species on one planet, where our behavior is a welcoming behavior and a behavior that expresses all those ideals that Diane talked about. And we're going to have to do that. We're going to have to do it all. And I remember a gathering we had shortly after Wayne passed at Omega Institute with people talking about this, and we were talking and talking. And Llewellyn Vaughan-Lee, who you know as the great Sufi leader and Jungian psychologist and founder of spiritual ecology, he was kind of boiling, and he jumped up and he simply yelled, "It's not enough." And I have always remembered that, because he realized we're going to have to bring together all of these different aspects that can move the world in the direction we're talking about. And that's why I think not only does David and his crew have these ideas, but David's a zealot. What I really admire about David, he is a zealot. And I mean that in the best way. He wants to see it really happen. And the last thing I'll say, in the letter that I took from Father Keating to His Holiness the Dalai Lama when David and I were there, the letter's never been made public, but I've let one sentence out, and that was where Father Keating said, when talking about all these things, we have to find a way to make this actually happen. And it was all in bold. So that's what I would just share.
Okay, so and again, we partnered with people all over the world here. We are partnered. We've actually brought in 20 new programs to the platform so far this year. So quite a pipeline of these conscious or transformational education programs that are coming into the platform. And because, as we've been said earlier in the program, when we talk about conscious living, it's not just one thing or 5 things. It's many. It's a whole way of looking out on the world. It's a whole way of living. And so we partner with thought leaders all over the world to bring their online programs to the platform, and then we split the revenue each quarter from the platform. So now the evolutionary leaders, Our Moment of Choice, these programs are on the platform. You can actually, there's a search feature. So if you go to humanitiesteam.org/stream, and then up in the top left on navigation, it says search. You can search Our Moment of Choice. You can search Conscious Leaders. You can search Ronaldo Brudico, David Gershon. They are actually, they've done programs with us. So you'll see all of the programs that are on the platform that they've been a part of. So I'll come back now into discussion with my colleagues. So, wow, we're covering a lot of important ground here as we talk about our moment of choice, aren't we?
Indeed.
So questions are coming in. I'm going to just start bringing some questions in here. I'll start with this one, Cheryl. She says, it seems to me that suddenly people are becoming concerned about the shape of the planet. Is it just me? Or is this true? Ronaldo, I'll just throw that one at you.
Well, so I've been writing about the climate change now for over 20 years. My book, Freedom from Mideast Oil, started out with a halcyon call to avoid the next Titanic miscalculation. And that miscalculation I describe as the inability to see that we have now created technology with the way we're destroying the biosphere that will end human civilization as you know it. That's pretty big. And I'm sorry that 20 years ago when I wrote that, it turned out to be alarmingly correct. And as you look at the Paris Accords, which I'm grateful for in terms of an aspirational goal, I'm grateful for COP26 as an aspirational goal. Nothing has happened. So we're going to emit more toxic greenhouse gases today than we did yesterday or the day before, the day of the Paris Accords. What's broken here? I think what's broken here is that people haven't realized the sense of immediacy. So we don't, and we have less time than people realize to fix this. So there's a lot of things that are coming. They're technologically sophisticated. They're going to help, including what I promote heavily, which is the hydrogen economy as a way to replace fossil fuel as the planetary fuel system. And we will probably get very close to succeeding on that before the worst happens. However, that alone will not shift it. Eliminating fossil fuels tomorrow morning is not going to shift it by itself. The amount of vicious cycle that's now perpetrating itself against human civilization, and I'm speaking specifically about the triggered methane that's being released from the deep oceans, from the permafrost, which far exceeds any danger from oil drilling, which is also getting worse, far exceeds the danger from cows, and which, by the way, cows can be treated to minimize their methane very easily with seaweed. So there's so many challenges that what I want people to realize is this is not something you have another couple of years to make up your mind about. The couple of days you had to make up your mind to go were last year, not this year. And what we have to do now is double down our efforts and recognize each of us in our own way have to be part of the solution, where the veritable statement is absolutely true. If you're not part of the solution, you are part of the problem. And I don't think people realize that yet, even well-meaning people like people on this call. Are we really taking it at the level of the threat that it exists? This is an existential threat. And if we do, how then shall we act? How we act? And I would urge everybody to ask themselves that question. What can you do, even if it's only a little thing? What can you do? It's a big thing. David Gershon's work of trying to get people one block at a time to green themselves, a huge step in the right direction because it's just consciousness, but it also is one step at a time. And I would urge us all to keep in touch with the work that is being done and promote and push those aspects which have the most capability of shifting the needle the quickest, because time right now is the biggest enemy.
Yeah, no kidding. There's a real urgency here for sure. Existential crisis, I'm sure, isn't a new term to people. There's a need. Yeah, David, I want to, and to Sarah, let me throw the next question at you, and then also anything, or did you want to say something first, David?
Well, you can throw another question, but I do want to respond to your initial question that Ronaldo sort of teed up and answered.
Yeah, please. Please, go ahead.
So one of the challenges we face is our paralysis. We don't know what to do. We know we have a problem, Houston, with climate, but how do we get people to actually respond in an effective way? And one of the challenges is we need to think very strategically about the process of change itself. So as we started to look at the Cool City Challenge strategy, which, as Ronaldo says, it's about different levels of scale having impact and different types of parts of the system to have impact. So it starts with the individual. It's always about us at some level. It moves to the block, to the neighborhood, to the city level, to the state level, to a country level, to a planetary level. But it's always built on the building block of the individual who says yes. But it's not just from the bottom up, it's also the top down. How do you work with the technologies like hydrogen technology-oriented things, like the good stuff, that amazing stuff that Ronaldo's doing? How do you get the policy pieces to work? How do you get new markets built? for hydrogen again, for example. So you got to bring a whole system together. So part of what we have to do is not just be responsive. We have to intelligently understand how to integrate all the moving parts so that we can be effective and ask questions that look at speed of change, magnitude of change, quality of change, where the best ROI is. And last thing I'm going to say is how to think about where to start. So when we looked at this and analyzed where the carbon was emitted, not necessarily where it was initially generated, but where the demand was being placed on it. And what concluded was that 70% of the carbon was emitted from cities, and 70% of that was us. So if we could empower cities and us to change and live low carbon lifestyles and ultimately carbon neutral lifestyles and scale that, we could have an impact quite profoundly that would also influence the supply side. So part of our thinking is how to build an effective system that can be able to create change at the speed, magnitude, and quality required, and that understands where the levers are for change, not necessarily where the solution set is, because the solution set is out there. No one has any issue with what we have to do, but it's how do we get them in the right configuration so that you can get the demand side shifting the supply side, which of course it's always demand side driven, right? As we know in business, right? Demand side creates the mechanism for the supply side to respond. So I wanted to give some context and some nuance. Cool City Challenge is an intervention around that, but it's also, should we say, a framework for how to think about the process of change. Whole system, bottom up behavior change oriented.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you. Thank you for bringing that in, David. I think there's a huge challenge here, but good work is being done. We've already started this pivot. As Ronaldo's sharing, it's far from certain that this whole future that we're talking about will be created. So this is actually why we're here. We're talking about this book, Our Moment of Choice, and it's available in paperback. It's got incredibly inspiring chapters in the book, but ultimately what this is about is each of us, that's probably why you're here as a viewer watching this program, is to your invitation, to really step into it and to stretch into it, and for all of us to really do all that we can, because not only for ourselves but our children and future generations, it's all on the line here.
Steve, can I add one more point? Sort of at the personal level, I laid out the systemic change process because Ronaldo was also speaking at the systemic level, but let me speak at the individual level. I was giving a talk recently, and the person in doing the interview asked me, so what's your final thought about the climate issue? Final thought sounds too,
too final.
Final. What are your parting words for us? Parting words of wisdom, hopefully wisdom. And what I said is ultimately, if we believe we can, we can. If we believe we can't, we can't. In other words, we have to start with our belief. If we see this as a doomed enterprise because it's so complicated, then we don't believe we can. We won't go to it with the gusto we need. So ultimately, the question is, how do I become a person of hope for the future? We are in this moment of choice. And for me, you need to be part of the solution. And if enough of us say, to Ronaldo's point, I choose to add my unique contribution to the issue of climate change, then we start to change the dynamic, the whole mindset on the planet. If we think we're doomed, then of course it's over. So,
I'd like to acknowledge Sarah too for a second, because many of you know Lynn Twist is one of my closest friends for many, many years, a fellow of the Academy. And what Sarah's done is she's taken one of the biggest sticking points, like obviously Lynn before with her work, but what Sarah's doing is she's demythologizing money and explaining to people that it's a form of energy. It's a form of green energy. I just want to turn the floor over to you, Sarah, because I think that shibboleth of what money people misperceive it to be has been one of the things holding people back from really jumping in and knowing they will be supported in consciousness if they join the movement and do whatever it is they're here to do. And you want to just comment, Sarah?
Yeah, absolutely. I think just our attitudes about money totally hold us back from being who we actually are and feeling free to be the person we are, to make the contribution that we feel we can, because there's literally terror. People are terrified around money. They're terrified of not having it. They're terrified of having it. They're terrified of doing things with it and of not doing things with it. And so it's so mixed up. It's really difficult to move forward with that kind of that kind of feeling and conflict inside. And I see that every day. There's something that I wanted to bring in following what you, Ronaldo, and David have both been talking about, because I spent 30 years really in the world of healing. And my work didn't start with money. That came later. It started with health and well-being and learning about energy. I trained for 22 years with Chinese masters. So I have this very deep experience of healing. And really what we're going through here at a planetary level, as well as at an individual level and community level, is a healing process, which is a totally natural process. Or we talk about evolution, we can call it an upgrading process, which is really what healing is when it takes place. If you're around healing a lot, you realize that it is always an upgrade of the system of a human being. And there's one thing that I've learned about healing, which is really, really important. Most people, when they're sick and they're wanting to get healthy, spend most of their time looking and asking the question, what's wrong with me? Why do I have so much pain? Why is this happening to me? And what happens when they do that is that they slow down the process of natural healing. It's much, much more difficult to heal if you're very focused on what's wrong. If you actually focus on being healthy, even when you don't feel it, and I'm not really talking about trying to con yourself into it. I'm trying to talk about seeing the little tiny signs, the little green shoots where something good is happening, and giving your energy and your attention to those little green shoots of growth, which are the shoots of the potential of a healthier version of you. That is the fastest way, in my experience, that I've found for healing to happen. Short of a miracle, miracles do happen, but if we're all waiting for a miracle and it doesn't happen, we're really in big trouble. But if a miracle happens, that's great. But if it doesn't happen, there are lots of things that you can do to contribute to healing. And what we do as individuals, literally, because we are the cells of our planet, is that the same thing is going to be happening at the planetary level. So our ability to heal, to simply see the shoots of what's happening, the good things, and grow them in your own life and in somebody else's life, and to let go of the obsession with being the pillagers and the rapists of the world. Because I think if we see ourselves as that, we see ourselves as so fundamentally flawed that we're unable to move. We must start to see ourselves as a part of nature, that we are part of this natural system, that healing is the natural way of life. And yes, we've all done some terrible things. We do terrible things to ourselves with the products and stuff we put in our bodies. We do terrible things to our planet, but that's not who we are in our nature. And when we remember who we are, we're able to take action, because life becomes simpler and clearer and cleaner. And we naturally do the right thing, because that's what we're made for.
Yeah, boy, beautiful. Very beautiful, Sarah, and so true. You know, this, I mean, it brings to mind just my own journey, and probably viewers, you know, our journey, where we start out kind of as that little self, where it's sort of, you know, you're building professional success and things. And then at some point, we awaken to just this, what ultimate reality is, and where we are a cell in this body of this world around us, of the universe, and where it's just we embrace a whole different way of living. Yes, is that you, Ronaldo?
No, I know we're out of time, and I got a hard stop, and I just want to thank Sarah and you and David for pulling this together. And I hope that in some small way, everybody gets a little bit more energized, because, you know, just because you can't do everything doesn't mean you shouldn't do something. And by the grace of God, you will. And we will all figure out in consciousness how to get from here to there. Rupert Sheldrake is rooting for us, I'm sure, in the morphogenetic resonant field. So thank you very much. I have to go, Steve.
Beautiful. Thank you, Ronaldo. Yeah, we are at the top of the hour. We probably should, there are more questions here. I'm guessing, David and Sarah, Sarah, it's the middle of the night. You're probably wanting to get back to sleep. David, I'm sure you got a crazy schedule too. Okay. All right, let me go then to a couple more questions. We'll go a little longer because we do have some great questions here. So Sarah, I'm going to come to you with the next question. This is from Linda. And after that, there's a question from Bill Spady, who's, boy, a huge innovator in conscious education out in the world. So, which I'm going to throw that question at you, David. So this one's for you, Sarah. It's from Linda. She says, I've noticed on a program my children ages 6 and 8 watch something called The Secret Life of the Zoo that mentions the possible extinction of certain animals. Do any of you have suggestions for explaining to children the state of the world that won't frighten them and still be able to teach them about the state of things?
Yeah, that is a very big question, Linda. And it's a kind of heartbreaking question in a way, because you want to protect the innocence of children. At the same time, you want to be honest with them. I spent 10 years in my younger life interviewing children, and I spent hours and hours and hours, thousands of hours, sitting with groups of children, listening to them talking about things that they really cared about. And one of the biggest things that I learned is that children know immediately when you are pretending, covering up the truth, or finding any way to embroider what's real. So I think the first thing is that we do need to be honest. I think the challenge for most adults is that most people don't feel that clear on how to communicate about these things, even for themselves. They don't really know how to think about it for themselves. And so it's very important, if you want to communicate with your children, that you are very engaged in finding your own inner peace around this, which usually means, I think, that you find your own way of contributing. Once you know what you're doing, like for me, once I knew what my life's work was, then I could have peace about all the stuff that I'm not doing. Ronaldo just said, you can't do everything. That's such a big lesson. We want to do everything and we can't. But once you know what your thing is, and it can be small, it can be big, it doesn't matter, then you have more peace inside yourself around the issues. And then you can start to communicate more clearly around the issues. And you can talk then just human to human to your children, because that's the thing I found. I never spoke down to children. I learned to just talk with them, to see them as another human being. Maybe I didn't use all the adult words, but I find it's easier to communicate anyway when the language is simple. But actually just sit and talk with them and listen to them, listen to their questions, don't pretend, and learn the principles, what I talked about healing just now. If you can share that with your children, how do things heal? How do things grow? What happens in the garden? What happens when somebody's stood on a plant and it dies? What happens with all the life around it? Let them learn from nature how it really works, because that's really the blueprint of our planet. And that's where we can learn how things regenerate themselves so naturally, because it's the way that we're made.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. And David, this is the last question here. Again, this is from Dr. William Spady, who's a big innovator in education around consciousness or oneness, unity consciousness. So he says, business doesn't get blamed for people's problems, but governments do. Can they replace government and remain blameless?
Can business replace government and remain? Is that the question?
Yeah.
I think I would frame this issue in a slightly different way. I would say, how do we build an effective governance system that enables us to create the kinds of changes required in our world at this complex moment in time when there's so many systems breaking down? And for me, it's about a whole system. We need government. We need business. We need the civic sector, the nonprofits. We need individuals showing up in their own civic life. And they have to work in some relationship to one another. One of the challenges of government is that it has been given responsibility to create change in our communities, and it's not really up to the task by itself. And when given that task exclusively, it falls short, because its job primarily is to deliver services, not to create change. So one of the opportunities available to us is to start figuring out how we can build this more multi-sector solution. In our Cool City Challenge, for example, when a city applies, we don't have the government apply. We have a multi-sector team of government, business, and nonprofits apply, because any kind of change that's going to have any impact requires all of the key players to be involved. So everyone needs to be accountable. When that happens, government can find its right role as policymaker, as policy implementer. But if it's given more than it's capable of, it will break down and be dysfunctional. If businesses engage in a coherent way, then it has a unique role to play. I'll share a sort of a final thought about, I keep saying final thought, parting thought on the topic of whole systems that might be of interest. So 850 million years ago, there was something called the Cambrian Revolution. And we had a crisis on the planet. There was too many single cell organisms were primarily processing oxygen. There was too much oxygen in the air. And so they were going to go extinct. We, as an experiment, were about to go extinct. So what had to happen was that all these single cell organisms had to actually combine and become a multicellular organism so it could process the amount of oxygen. And that was our first extinction level threat. We're now facing our sixth version of it. But it boiled down to we have to move into a multicellular organism. And we as a species need to do that at every level. None of us by ourselves can do this. One of the great things I think about this book, by the way, is that it is so whole system oriented. There's so many parts here. So as a reader reading the book will get a feel for all the dimensions that are required to actually be effective in creating the kind of change we need. But at every level, the question we all have to ask is, how do we work better together? And if we answer that question effectively, we have a solution that will address climate change and so many of the other issues we face.
Yeah, good. Thank you, David. Yeah, thank you, Sarah. And Ronaldo has left. So thank you, Ronaldo. So what an hour and 8 minutes it's been. So I just want to thank you all so much for taking your time to be here with us. Thank you, viewers, for being here. And I know viewers are taking this to heart. These are all conscious Facebook pages that we're broadcasting to. So I'm sure there's been a whole lot of thought-provoking wisdom that's been shared. And boy, as has been stated, and actually as the book so beautifully invites us, this is our moment of choice, right? And as Ronaldo shared, we can't do everything, but we can do something. And certainly we're all being called to stretch, to do our something, find our trim tab. So thank you. Thank you, viewers, for being here with us. Again, David Gershon, Sarah McCollum, Ronaldo Brutico, thank you for being our guests here today. Next week, we're going to be with HeartMath. Deborah Rosman is our guest here on the Humanities Team Live program next Wednesday. We always start at 9 a.m. Pacific, which is noon Eastern. Join us next week. It'll be a fantastic discussion. And hey, have a fantastic rest of the day, rest of the week. And hey, let's do this thing. We are doing it. I know we're certainly talking to the urgency that's here, but I think on some level we know too, certainly I do in the Humanities Team, we say this is happening. We can do this. We are doing this. We will do this. So let's do this. Let's stretch into it, make it happen together. Okay, good day, everybody. Love and peace and blessings. And see you next week.
Thank you, Steve.
Take care.
Bye now.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, David, Sarah.